If you are trained in C++ and that's the only thing you can do, then essentially it's hammer looking for a name.
So I have written a personal calendar agent which manages my calendar right now.
I would love to use it for sure.
That's a product idea.
No company is ever going to be $1 trillion company.
What are the 5 steps you're doing to build a company?
An ambitious talent who wants to learn. The one thing that's certain is change. That adaptability of the talent to actually go figure out things from first principles.
We had this mobile era where all of us got excited and it didn't quite feel, this is that big, even though it's pretty big.
Am I the best? Is this a local Optima or is that a global Optima?
So now to build the killer, it has to actually understand the entire concepts in the novel, like the relationships, all those things, right?
Is a search engine actually even relevant?
One thing is very clear, the software engineering is up for disruption.
Now, the next evolution is
Welcome to the next episode of Next Big Opportunity. In the next big opportunity, we're trying to build a narrative on AI where young founders or experienced founders can understand and learn from the founders who have started the companies, who build the companies, and can generate a lot more value to it. Overall mission for the podcast and my personal mission is to contribute to India's GDP of $5 trillion and then maybe 2047 when India will become a developed nation. I think a lot more need to be done and the power is in your hand as founders to really build. There's capital available, there's talent available, there's a lot more confidence in India as a country. So I think it is our time to build, experiment fast and learn. And today we're going to talk about opportunity in AI agents. Looks like a very complex world out there or a new world that is getting formed. There is a $1 trillion+ opportunity, $300 billion alone in, AI agents for SaaS companies or the companies where SaaS companies got, or the areas where SaaS companies got built. So we're going to talk about this massive opportunity, demystify AI agents today. We have guest today, Lakshmi Shankar, who is my partner at Together Fund. He's based out of Bay Area. He was VP of Search at Google, Global VP of Search at Google before he joined Together, and has wealth of experience with Twitter and IBM and E&Y. Also joining us is Mukund. Mukund was, is founder of Emergent now. He was CTO and co-founder at Dunzo. And before that, he was in New York working for Google. So we have a lot of things in common. New York, Bangalore with the Mukund and I, and of course, Google between Lakshmi and Mukund. Welcome to the episode. Yes.
great to be here.
So Lakshmi, let me start from you. Given that, you were also instrumental in launching Gemini in Sundar Pichai's team. You have seen Google Search, which is a flagship product and probably the most valuable, not probably, it is the most valuable product that Google has. So if you have to define what an AI agent is, let's understand. Everybody knows opportunity is big. I think you can read about it saying 300 billion plus, some even talk about $1 trillion or more spent because there's a $2 trillion spent on enterprise software and maybe 10x spend on the salaries, right, that we do in our organizations, right? So obviously the market opportunity is huge. So can you demystify for us from your perspective, who have seen the AI wave shaping up the last 2 years, what an AI agent is? How will you explain what an AI agent is?
So I think the simplest way to describe what an AI agent is think of it as a piece of software that can take any instruction that you want it to do as input and has the ability to autonomously execute that input to produce some output. And in that process, it can understand any forms of input. So it could be voice, it could be chat, it could be an image, it could be a piece of video, and has the understanding of what are you trying to actually get done? What is the goal? And has the ability to go ahead and then try to deliver on that goal as the output. And through that process, there's a feedback loop where it actually tells you the first attempt at solving the problem. And it can either have a human in the loop, you as a person can actually provide input to say, this is right, this is wrong, or it can learn by itself. And that is the simplest definition of an AI agent.
Give me an example.
So, I think the one that probably most of us are familiar with is we all have an Alexa at home, or coming from Google, you all have a Google Home at home. And so the ability for you to actually say, hey, what's the weather today? Can you please tell me the time of the next train arrival? And it understands that input. It knows to go and actually query various web pages where there's potential information resides, and then produces that output, again, in a voice format, in the manner that you want it to actually be consumed. And you could say, this is okay. Can you record the next show that is of your favorite TV series? Now, that is now a little bit more intelligence. It can go in actually, if you have a DVR, then it essentially can set, or if it's integrated connected TV, it can actually say, okay, this is the next episode, and it knows automatically to record that episode for you to view at a later point. So that's now a little bit more sophistication that's added to something that is household.
So my memory of or my image of Alexa, Google Home is pre-ChatGPT, right?
That's right.
So what has really changed post-ChatGPT? So now why nobody spoke about agents in such a big way as we're talking now, or sometime people like both of you are also witnessing it now, right? So what has changed in your opinion?
Yeah, it's the most relatable example of V1 of an agent. What is actually now extremely exciting is this idea of an agentic workflow that is essentially completely autonomous and exercising intelligence. So let's break that down. So the idea is that in the past, you used to basically provide one form of input, and it tries to basically understand that input and tries to store it internally in a very structured way to say, okay, take an example of an enterprise. So I'm now in sales. There's a sales agent who's just had a call. In the past, I would basically go and enter into a software, choose your favorite CRM. It would actually record it to say, okay, you met this person. This is the new lead, and there's an opportunity to potentially meet again because they're interested in this. The underlying assumption pre-ChatGPT era is that the input has to be structured, and then the data store has to be structured in some format. The promise of ChatGPT when it came out around 2022 mid is that the input now can be fairly any format. It can be an email. It can be similar to before, typing something in. It can be a voice conversation. So any type of multimodal input, and the data need not be stored in a very structured way. It can be stored in any format, and now you have the ability to execute on that. And so that is the ChatGPT era V2 of agents. And now what we're moving to is the V3 of agent, which is quite right upon us right now, which is essentially similar to now before, any input, storing it any output, to actually, now previously it was a step in the automation. But now instead of actually saying, okay, I want to sell this, and now you've made one part of the process easier, input to output, what I want is a goal. I basically want to be able to essentially convert the sale with this customer. So now there is an agent that is actually capturing the input information. Maybe there's an account executive agent that is actually trying to figure out how big is this customer, mid-tier, large tier. There's an SDR agent that's figuring out how much of this is going to be inbound, outbound that I need to reach. And then there is now an AI sales engineer that is figuring out what is the roadmap that I need to show to build an MVP for this. And each of these are agents that are automatically talking to each other. The inputs of one is going to the output of the other. And now you have the opportunity to set the goal and not the tactics. And essentially observe each of these agents talk to each other, and now see as the underlying objective, the outcome, the goal that I'm trying to actually optimize for. You figure out the how. I care about the goal.
Output. Wow, this is like magic to me. That reminds me of movie Matrix. That's how I relate to agents. Agent Smith, exactly. So Agent Smith, and he is automatic learning, and adapting to the circumstances. So now that reality, I think we're beginning to live some part of reality. Exactly. Eventually, we might see something like Matrix in real life as we move towards AGI.
Yes.
So coming to you, Mukund, right? So of course, you have tons of practical experience in building software products. And for you, moving from automation to now autonomous, is it not something which you fear? Which you think developers will fear? So how do you demystify this AI engine, right? If I were a CTO or if I were an engineer who come out in the market today after getting to a really competitive school in engineering, and suddenly I think now, by the way, agent can write better code or it can do a job now autonomously.
Right.
So what is your perspective on agents, and how do you really define agents?
Right. So I think Lakshmi did a great job at sort of at the base level, right? I think the way at least I think of agents is essentially it's a software program which has a lot of autonomy, right? And it can take decisions on its own, and it can sort of drive itself towards a complex goal, right? and it takes feedback from the environment, learns on its way, right? So I mean, one simple way of thinking of it is that, let's say you are planning a trip, right? So today, you can give like small instructions saying that, hey, book me a flight, right? That's a simple instruction that programs can do, right? But if you give a very complex objective, like, hey, I want to take a trip to in Europe, and these are my conditions, right? Can a software program go and take all these variables in, make decisions, take real-time input, right, and make the whole trip? So those kind of objectives is what agents can do today, right? I mean, the mental model that at least I think of often when I think of agent is essentially think of a smart, skilled human, right, who has an access to computer, right? Whatever this person can do digitally, right, is what an agent would be able to do, maybe in 6 months, in a year, right? And this skill level keeps going up, right? And the complexities and the pace at which it can work, right, that sort of keeps increasing over time, right? So that is the mental model that I keep, like whatever a skilled human can do with a computer is what an agent should be able to do, right? And that's how we sort of also model it.
That's a good way to bring the mental model as to if. Now we had a computer software first. Now we have a human-like computer software,
right,
which can do more complex tasks and more autonomously, right? But what has changed in technology so far to enable it to do it? And to what extent, what level that skill set is? You said, skill level, right, so to speak.
Right.
So what has really changed in technology? What fundamental thing changed for us to reach here?
Right. So I think obviously with LLMs that came out, right, I think the world has changed, right? I think it's the first time we have this sort of general purpose intelligence, right? And if you look under the hood, right, what it's trying to do is just predict the next word, right? But by predicting that next word, it's basically has built a general model of the world, right? And how concepts are related, how things are linked. And so you can think of this. So Ilya gives a very, very interesting example, right? He's saying that, okay, if it's just predicting the next word, right? Imagine somebody's writing a detective novel. In the end, it says the killer is dash, right? And it's predicting the killer. So now to predict the killer, it has to actually understand the entire concepts in the novel, like the relationships, all those things, right? So I think LLMs, as they have sort of grown in size, they can sort of model these complexities and they get better at it. So I think that is a fundamental unit of intelligence that is there, right? And so far it's been very informational, right? So ChatGPT and all of those
just
things.
for the audience, so LLM is large language models.
Large language
models, and everybody is not an engineer who's listening to this. So that they are the fundamental change, which can absorb. I'm just summarizing what Mukund just said, which can absorb a lot of natural language and start to make sense out of it, to the extent that they can predict the next possible word or next possible action, which is agents. So we were at LLM. So LLM is the first big change.
Right. So LLM is the fundamental building block, large language models, right? So language model is anything that takes a set of text and outputs the next text, right? And now we're moving to actions, right? So can it predict the next action? And once it's able to do that, then you're sort of the agent gets generalized.
So what fundamental thing is change in technology where we have moved from words to action? So what is that shift that happened? And you mentioned Elias. For audience, Ilya was a co-founder of OpenAI along with Sam Altman. Now, of course, he's starting on his own, right? Which is also massive. It's already unicorn value.
Yeah, I mean, there is $1 billion.
There is $1 billion, right?
So like a seed round.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they're not going to release anything until they're just going to release the safe intelligence.
Yeah, safe intelligence. We'll see a lot of. So coming back to the topic. So what has changed? So now from in last 2 years, which is really fast, from words to now action. What fundamental technology piece has changed?
So I think, at some point, people figured out that, hey, if it can output the next word, next token, next information, right? Can it also start outputting next information, right? For example, can I just teach it that, hey, I want to delete a file, right? Can it just, issue a command, like rm file name? And the moment sort of people realize, oh, now LLMs can talk language, of computers, can sort of talk to APIs, can talk to different machines, right? Can it actually start automating things on its own, right? And I think the shift that's happening right now is even today, when you write a software, you basically, hand code everything and edge cases. And it's a complex world which is continuously evolving and changing, right? And it's very hard to sort of, hard code everything into a program, right? But if you can let this intelligent machines and LLMs sort of, take feedback from the environment and take a decision, right? Then a lot of those things, become possible. For example, let's say, you have a calendar agent, right? So I have written a personal calendar agent which manages my calendar right now.
I would love to use it for sure.
That's a product idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, hobby thing that I've built, right? And essentially, what it does is whenever somebody emails me, I have personal calendar, work calendar, right? It checks what is the, open slots, right? And it knows, okay, if email is, so I've written in natural text, okay, these are my preferred order of meeting, right? Like, my family, investors, colleagues and this kind of thing. And it knows, like, so it can make a decision, if there are two meetings coinciding, which one to pick, right? And these are very hard to sort of hard code in a software program. And sometimes, times don't match, sometimes locations are not available. So it is able to take this general information in real time, right? Which is sort of imperfect world, right? And make decisions on the fly, which are not perfect today, right? But directionally, it's able to sort of, replace, save hours of time for me. Right?
This is a great example. So basically, instead of EAs, we'll now have actual agents, which you can name as your EA, but they're actually computer software who are acting like agents in that case, right? So I have one last question on technology before we move on to the opportunity at large. Right. So in the cloud world, we have REST APIs which came in which two computers can talk or two systems can talk. So in the world of LLMs, you think that mode of communication also will have to change then if two agents have to talk to each other, right? So I think I'm going to talk, the context of this question is the opportunity, right?
Yes.
So which means if your technology is moved from cloud, which is data storage or data communication or workflow management to then to LLMs, which brought in all the text language. Now you're saying actions, right? So that means the way the computers talk to each other will also change or should also change?
Definitely. Like, I think we are in a very early stage right now, right? I think a lot of these things have not been defined. Like, people are still exploring what is the best way to do this, right? My own opinion is that it's going to be natural language, right? Like two agents talking to each other in natural language. It may not even be natural language. It may be some, like vectorized mathematical numbers that they're talking, which they understand better than us, right?
Yeah, so I want to come in here and talk to our audience. So LLMs work on defining functions, right? Is my limited understanding of engineering, right? Yeah. So they go by functions. So at least now computers have to talk in functions instead of just the data APIs, correct?
I think, they sort of can do function calling, right?
Function calling,
they can actually understand what the function should do and pass. And I think that is a V1 right now, right? I feel like we are in very early stages. I think a lot of these things are gonna evolve continuously and change. Like Claude just came out with MCP, the new protocol, right? And I think we're in very early stage to sort of see what's going to
So Claude is a competition to ChatGPT.
Yeah,
I
Claude
know some
is
of them
Anthropic's large language
model. I'm sure some of you use it. And what is MCP?
So it's a new protocol that's come out with, and essentially it is to link various tools. You can have a server in the middle, which Claude can talk to and then understand the language of different servers and different APIs, right? So now you don't need to sort of hand code it. You can just define them. And my view is that I think agents would sort of at one level will talk only natural language, right? And at least the internal protocol that we have developed also, right, for multi-agent systems is generally they're just chatting in natural language so that it is debuggable for us as well, right? But I think like we're moving to a world where, they can sort of ask questions to a program, right? For example, let's say there is a weather agent. You can ask, hey, like, where is the best weather in August, right? And do you think it's going to rain, on this day, right? And it's going to tell, it's going to rain. And then it can ask again, like, hey, okay, is it going to rain too much? And like, can I organize a party, right? Or like, is it okay, right? So I think the form of communication is going to become like a lot more natural.
So whenever I speak to somebody in London, I know Lakshmi, you spent 26 years in the UK. I always start with weather.
Yes.
That's going to take the pleasure away from, rather than talking about you.
It's always the best way to start to talk about the weather.
Right. So coming to this, so I want to come to you. Yuvard has comment on this.
I just wanted to build on something that Mukund said, is that I think I kind of think of this as, what has enabled it, to answer that question and build on what Mukund said. I think at the model layer is actually been the biggest unlock.
Right.
And I think there's three fundamental primitives that have actually enabled a lot of what Mukund eloquently explained, which is firstly, it's context. Secondly, it's memory. And thirdly, it's planning. And so just to elaborate on each of those, first is around context, which is, I know, to kind of elaborate on the example, I know you're trying to basically plan on a holiday. In the past, you would have to make one call that basically says, hey, where to go on a summer holiday, where to go for the summer holiday. Next is, what are the best prices? Third is, where are the best hotels? And each one was an individual, think of it as calls. But now the broader context is, I want to go on a holiday. I'm a family of 4, and you figure. So that now there's a context, and there's infinite context on every single holiday you've been in the past and every single thing that you like. And so the context window is continuing to be larger and larger. I'm putting it in very layperson terms. So the context window is now is there. Second thing is this idea of memory or persistence, or state. There's different ways of calling the same thing, which is I know from the last time to this time what I did last and what was the outcome and what was your feedback to basically now use that to refine further what to do next.
So I know somebody will listen to my feedback every single time.
Yes, exactly. So
It has changed.
exactly.
It may not remember everything.
It may not remember. The idea is that there is a possibility. And the last part is around planning, which is the idea that essentially task completion. There's a goal and then task 1, and then I go back to the context, I update the memory, task 2. If it didn't work, go back to task 1, take a different path, and then try that. If it works, carry on to the next thing until I achieve that goal. So those 3 fundamental capabilities or primitives have kind of now given way to this agentic world that we live in today.
So that opens up, as I think, I can't even put a number on the opportunity, right? Because now every field that we are in, from as simple as asking about weather, which is the most common conversation or starting conversation almost everywhere in the world, to complex tasks like software engineering, to integration. So it has going to have a far-reaching impact on everybody, right? So, and that's where we have excitement on one hand and the fear on the other side, right? So let's talk about excitement first. I'm going to talk about the fear as well.
Sure.
So how would you contextualize this opportunity? How large is so for a listener who is a founder, who is in a college or working in MNC or in a startup, thinking of starting up? How do you wrap this whole thing?
Yeah. I'll give you a consumer example and I'll give you an enterprise example. So on the consumer example, I'm kind of going back to my previous world at Google. Fundamentally, you talked about a bad day would be essentially somewhere around $500 million of revenue. And the reach is around 1.2 billion users on a daily basis. Now, the idea is that there is a website that you're going in and you're actually asking for something, and then it gives you back 10 blue links, and then you select one of those. Now you see with AI-powered overviews that Google have launched, and then things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and others, there's now summarization. Now the next evolution is a search engine actually even relevant? Is it actually about a goals engine? Is it about essentially, I want to achieve this goal, and ultimately you make as many calls in any data sources, call Expedia agent, call your Kayak agent, or in India, Make My Trip agent, and essentially call any other sub-agents, orchestrate the answers. You now know what I want to get done. I'm no longer going to Google search and searching for these or going to any of these websites. Now essentially come back to me with this output. And then if I like it, go book the holiday for me. So I completely can take care, again, building on
Find me the best discount.
Find me the best discount, find me the best deal and get it done.
Or not, let me paraphrase it. Does it have an implication on the brands therefore? Because today, human as a consumer, I'm interacting with Make My Trip in India or Expedia in the US.
That's right.
And now if my agent, which is a computer software or a kind of computer software going to interact, what happens to the brands?
It's an excellent point. Essentially, today's websites are becoming app stores or Google Play stores. And essentially the next generation is they become agentic stores. And essentially a marketplace of agents. There's still going to be Make My Trip agent. You're still going to talk to it. Make My Trip is still going to have the proprietary data of the best deals, the best discounts, and that it is going to talk to you. There is a question mark around if it's all seamless and if it's natural language from one agent to another, where is then the awareness that I'm actually talking to Make My Trip? I think that is going to be an interesting evolution, and there's going to be a number of intermediation, disintermediation to see which brand is closest to you that you trust. Is there a world where there is a travel agent, there is a personal agent, there is an education agent, there is a therapist agent? Is that the world? Or is there a master agent that I'm talking to that essentially is orchestrating across all of them, and I'm abstracted away and everything else gets disintermediated? This is the next. I think this is why, as Mukund said, we're still early innings. We'll have to see how all of this plays out. But that's on the consumer use case.
So I have one takeaway from this for myself. I'm going to invest more in compute stocks. So chips are definitely going to be even more important. If so many agents are going to be out there,
yes,
I think compute power required will be huge.
Immense.
So Nvidia, Amazon, AWS, I am going to buy the stock tomorrow.
not a stock tip.
And then the second part, on the enterprise side, I think you were spot on when you said software plus essentially the people budgets. And so just to elaborate on that. So today, just in sales and marketing, The largest player in the market is Salesforce. Their total revenue is $25 billion. Now, if you look at the size of the TAM, if you look at it as software plus sales, the sales and marketing budget globally is $1 trillion. The largest company, if they take a software-only approach or SaaS approach, is currently a minuscule of the total TAM. But if you now look at it as essentially not software as a service, but service as a software, where you can actually go after both the software budget, but also the people budget, and effectively say we can save what previously was labor intensive and human intensive, and we can actually augment and drive efficiencies, then potentially there's some of that labor savings that can go towards the TAM. Then you start going towards the $1 trillion opportunity.
So I just want to summarize for the audience here. So we're talking about sales and marketing tech opportunity.
That's right.
And by data in SaaSBoomi, what we saw, 40% of all startups in SaaS was in sales and marketing tech. So it's a good news for them. Obviously, still India is learning, and we have not made it as big as Salesforce, or Unicorn has not really, apart from Freshworks, of course, which became Decacon. I think there's a massive opportunity for the founders out there to look at software plus salary TAM, just in the sales and marketing tech we're talking here, right? And of course, we can take area by area in healthcare, in software engineering, in customer support, and many such areas. So that's the opportunity you have to go after. And we're going to talk more about how do you really go about building a company in this area and what really changes. But it's an absolute fantastic point, Lakshmi, to talk about how it expands the TAM and how suddenly even Salesforce revenue of $25 billion looks so small in what is going to be coming up in the next, or unfold in next 5 years or decade in front of us.
That's right.
I'm sure everybody's going to be hooked on to listening to how we're going to take on this opportunity.
Right.
So Mukund, coming to you from your, I know, I'd love to talk about, I know Emergent is now looking at building agents for software engineering in many ways, right? So can you just explain to your journey of reaching to, I know you didn't start with that thesis of agents, but you have kind of stumbled upon or thought about. So I'd love to know about what Emergent is doing, and how do you transition from, you left as a co-founder of Dunzo and CTO of Dunzo to start this. So we'd love to know what your how you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been interested in AI for a long time, right? I think I was one of the first early engineers when I was at Google working in the deep learning platform. In fact, my first startup was trying to build a deep learning platform, which I was trying to build with a couple of Googlers, and then sort of moved back to India, right? And I've been sort of closely tracking the field for a while because, and 2016 is when, OpenAI came up with this new paper called Sentiment Neuron, right? Where for the first time, there was this general model, which was similar to a language model where they had not trained it for, so generally the previous era of machine learning, the way things used to work was, you have a specific task. For example, you want to, let's say, in this case, let's say you have a review, an Amazon review, and you want to predict whether it's a positive review or a negative review, right? And the way you would do this task is that you would take a lot of examples and you will hand label them that, okay, this is positive, this is negative, feed it to a machine, right? And then build sort of a classifier, which will, on a new text, tell you what is the probability of this being a positive or negative review, right? And 2016 is when this Sentiment Neuron paper came out. This was before even the transformers had come out. And they had trained this sort of language model just to predict the next word. But it was doing a better job, even beating the state-of-the-art sentiment predictor at the sentiment task. So now it can take an Amazon review and predict better than what was hand-labeled, hand-trained to predict the sentiment of this review.
And so 2016 you're talking
2016, right? Wow. So that's when I first sort of took notice that, something has changed, right? This is sort of,
So in 2016, a computer software or a program could better predict
a general machine learned program could beat a specific machine learning task.
Reviews, right? In the reviews at least.
It was just an example, right? That is when I started taking to notice. I was like, something has changed, right? Because this is something that I had not, I had this prediction in my mind, okay, what's going to happen in the world, right? And I had not predicted this to happen so soon, right? And since then I've been following it. Like when GPT-2 came out, GPT-3 came out, we played around with it. It was when Copilot sort of came out, Stable Diffusion came out. At the same time, I was leaving Dunzo, right? And I was thinking sort of, hey, what to do next? And I was planning to retire. I was like, okay, let me take a break. It's been a 10-year-long journey of building Dunzo, right? And but things were so exciting that all I could do, in the nights and weekends was just code. And me and my brother, who's my co-founder. He's a PhD in machine learning. We were one of the first people to build Stable Diffusion on a laptop when it came out, right? And pretty quickly realized that, okay, this is once in a lifetime opportunity right now, right? To sort of, go and build something. And this is what probably internet would have felt in 90s. I think we had this mobile era where, all of us got excited and like, it didn't quite feel, this is that big, even though it was pretty big. I think with AI, I think it's once in a lifetime opportunity to really, really be part of a fundamental change that's going to happen, right? And I think, like in 90s, if somebody would have told me that, hey, internet company would be a $1 trillion company, right? At that time, the market caps were pretty small, right? And you would have said, oh, like no company is ever going to be $1 trillion company, right? So I think today, there's a possibility that, a new company that's getting formed, maybe over the next couple of years is a $100 trillion company that gets built over the next 10 years, right? I think things are moving really fast. And I think, so there is this TAM of services and the human labor and everything, but I think there's a second order effect, right? Like when sort of things, get automated, things are even faster when people can run millions of experiments at the same time, right? Like the drug discovery and all of those things. I think there's a second order effect, which is like even more powerful and which we can't see today, right? And,
we're too early in the wave to see the second order impact.
Right. And so I think the opportunity is massive. I would say that right now is the right time to sort of
So moving from billions to trillions, basically.
Definitely, I think in next decade, 2 decades, like there'll be a company which is $100 trillion company.
And it's going to be very motivation for all the young founders. If I were in college today, I will be all over the place. I would
drop out and build something.
Yeah, that's what it says. I don't know whether that's a good advice or bad advice.
All the parents are now worried.
Are going to say. But I think it's a great opportunity for all of us out there. I think, and India also is a forefront, given that we have such a young population and people are hungry and enough capital is available now. So I think it's a hundreds of billions or trillions dollars of opportunities going to unfold, especially in agent alone.
Right.
So at that point, I would want to bring in a surprise guest, which is ChatGPT itself.
Oh,
wow.
Awesome.
So I've been asking ChatGPT because ChatGPT is, it's very smart now. It has a repository, as you said, of a lot of things.
Are you using the voice mode?
Yes.
Okay.
We are going to do that. Hey, ChatGPT, we are doing a podcast discussing how big an AI agents market is for founder is. Can you give your view on how big the market is for AI agents and what the real opportunity is?
The market for AI agents is vast and rapidly expanding, with opportunities across various industries. Here are a few key areas where AI agents are making significant impact. 1. Automating repetitive tasks. AI agents can handle mundane tasks like data entry, scheduling, and customer support, freeing up human workers for more complex tasks. Enhancing decision-making. By analyzing large datasets, AI agents can provide insights and recommendations, aiding in strategic planning and operational decisions. Personalization. In sectors like marketing and e-commerce, AI agents can tailor recommendations and content to individual preferences, enhancing user experience. Software development. AI agents can assist in coding, debugging, and even automating entire development processes, accelerating software production. Healthcare. AI agents can support diagnosis, treatment planning, and patient management, improving efficiency and outcomes. The real opportunity lies in developing AI agents that can seamlessly integrate into existing workflows, offer real-time adaptability.
Actually, that brings me to an interesting topic, Mukund, especially for you. We're talking about Emergent, right? And so if you can tell us, how did you pivot to now automating or building agents for software engineering?
Right. Yeah. So at Emergent, we are building autonomous coding agents that can automate the entire software development lifecycle, right? Think of it as an assistant or an agent which can take very high-level instruction. Imagine assigning it as a bug or a Jira task, and it can completely on its own, with minimal sort of human intervention, complete the entire software journey or life cycle, right? So right from writing the code to setting up the environment to running tests to, let's say if it's solving a bug, it can reproduce a bug, it can look into logs, figure out what the issue is, and then sort of enhance the test cases, validate, and then submit a pull request, which obviously a human would review and then merge into production, right? And so we started our journey initially building sort of testing agents, right? And the whole idea was that, hey, so a lot of the software development time actually goes into testing, and how can we sort of reduce that and accelerate the software development sort of cycle? And slowly we realized that the core part that we were sort of working and iterating on was, like setting up the environments and the code generation bit, because even the test generation sits very close to code generation, right? And we realized that, okay, like the opportunity is much bigger if we sort of just go after the general software engineering market, right? And internally we have this term we call agent experience, right? And that's what sort of we are focused on. So we look at agent just like a user of a program, right? And we sort of care a lot about like how is agent's experience in the environment. Does it get stuck? Does it sort of, is it able to recover things, right? And at least the way we sort of like envision the world is where sort of every software engineer becomes like a 100x engineer, right? Like we've all heard the 10x developer term, right? Where certain developers were able to get 10x more than average developers, right? I think with agents, I think everybody becomes a 100x developer.
So
right?
if I am an average developer, should I be fearing for my job?
I mean, I think you should be embracing AI like very rapidly, right? I think I'm really surprised that I talked to a lot of people, even in interviews, and like I talked to a lot of CTOs and leaders, and a lot of them are still hesitant to sort of embrace AI. And I think the fears are like not well ill-defined. And I think like the concerns are that okay, the quality of software is going to go down. Will my engineers be so dependent that if AI goes away, like they're not able to sort of do things. But I think there are ways to address those sort of concerns. But I think at this point, I think people should be embracing AI and like really like.
So what you're building is
that.
like Devin. Devin becomes very popular, right?
Right.
It's the first time when it got launched, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, okay, now you can hire actually software agent to actually, instead of hiring a human, you're hiring an agent to do a software coding, right? So is it something you're building
so
is like Devin?
It's similar to that. Like our approach is slightly different, right? In terms of how we think about the problem space, right? We are sort of currently focused on defining certain tasks which it can do really, really well and do it fully autonomously. And then there are certain aspects of tasks where it needs to be in more of human in the loop assistant kind of mode, right? So I think general sort of direction is same. We like both are trying to sort of bring autonomy to software engineering, right? But I think the approaches and the nitty-gritties, the markets are slightly different.
So you've taken an approach of starting with human in the loop to some extent, and it's not fully autonomous. It has some human element which will come in either whether review or So basically, you're taking an angle of creating 100x engineers. So you can convert an average engineer to 100x engineer.
Right. So we still want human to be in the control, right? I think you can outsource delegate large part of tasks to the agents, but we still want human to be in the control, sort of as a operator or a guide who can sort of like work with these agents.
So how is the initial customer reaction? So when you're approaching design partners or early customers?
Yeah, I think excitement. There is a lot of excitement.
But what are the key questions they ask?
I think the biggest question everybody has on their mind is that, hey, does it work, right? And is it reliable, right? And I think like if I tell you that, hey, like I can build your software 10x, 100x faster, like you wouldn't say no, right? And I think the question is, is it really possible, right? I think, and the success sort of depends a lot on like how ready your code base is for AI. For example, I think this is a time where teams with good engineering practices, teams which have invested in like developing best practices, like setting up environments, good testing practices, I think they're going to benefit a lot from the AI because AI is able to understand the code and develop the code way faster if the code base is good, right? I mean the biggest question that everybody's asking, hey, does it work? And in many sort of early pilots we are seeing phenomenal results, like where like months of work gets compressed to days.
So give an example of a company where such pilot is running right now.
Right. So we are working with a couple of large enterprises. Like don't want to name them right now,
yes,
right? But I think the sort of general areas that we are attacking first is a lot of tech debt kind of areas, which is sort of easy to experiment, so slightly scoped down, right? And the learnings are sort of applicable across the board, right? With different companies, right? And so things like library upgrades. So like it's a pain. Like anybody who goes through SOC 2 knows that every year they have to like make sure that all the libraries are compliant, right? And these agents are able to sort of do that and automatically, completely on its own, right? And we are seeing cases like integrations. So generally, our focus right now is that things that are repeatable, right? And things that we can sort of learn from is something that we are trying to sort of templatize and automate completely. And so you can imagine things that would take. So one of the customers we're working with, they have these integrations with logistics partners, and typically the TAT is 1 to 4 months of a new integration, and sort of we have been able to bring down to days, right? Like
that's like magic.
I think everything that's happening in AI feels like magic right now.
Yes. So, but what is the impact? So let's say India has give and take about million IT workers, right?
I think more.
Yeah, or more, right? I'm just taking that number. Yeah. I'm just taking a guess. Let's say
Yeah.
10 million IT enabled or IT enabled
Right.
workers, right? So what, as I see 5 years down the line,
Right.
and that could be even shorter, but let's say 5 years down the line, what is so do you think the workforce will come down, or we have to repurpose those people? So what will happen at a little bit more philosophical level, so
Right.
and that's where the fear is going to come from, right?
Yes. So I think every time when there is a technology revolution that comes, right, I think there's this fear of jobs, right? Like I think it happened when we were moving from horses to car. This is a famous example, right? Like everybody was like, "Oh, what's going to happen to all these horses? People who maintain horses?" And so it was a big business, right? Like even the cleaning up of dung on the road, right? And people didn't imagine that cities will get larger, right? Like and now we'll have bigger homes. People would have a lot more time, right? Because they can travel. So I think there is second order impacts, and and I think there has never been a time where technology has progressed and people have never had jobs. I think people would find new jobs, people would find new things to do, and I think we are I mean, we have achieved very little as a species right now, right? I mean, imagine how many things you want to build, right? And how many have you been able to build, right? And so I think with AI and automating of software engineering and everything, I think people will be able to build a lot more, right? And sort of whatever you want to sort of see in the wild, it'll be available. I mean, I feel there are two sort of versions in my mind of things that are evolving. One obviously is that we get into age of abundance where everybody has a lot of time, and people truly do what they want to do, like maybe sit here and chat for hours, right? And the work is getting done, right? Like imagine how kings used to live, right? Like I mean, they didn't have work. I mean, they were just thinking.
Yeah, talking about when common man become a king, basically.
Yeah,
we'll see
definitely.
if that arrives. But I come back to the topic. So Lakshmi, of course, you had experience in Google, which is a forefront of not only launching technology but also adopting technology internally, right? And so, have you had experience in usage of agent inside of Google?
Yeah, I think Sundar in Q3 earnings actually said that 25% of all code that got checked in actually has AI, is AI enabled or AI agentic or AI generated. That is huge. And then immediately the question that was asked is, is this going to replace Google engineers? And I think as Sundar rightly pointed out, and as Mukund rightly pointed out, it has just made our engineers, our Google engineers, that much more efficient and to take on bigger problems and be more creative in the problem solving. And so I kind of think about this fear versus embrace as I go back to when I first started. So this is post my college. My first job was actually as a test engineer at an IBM. And you all will understand, especially those who are listening, who are coming from an engineering background, you go through a rotation of test engineer, then you go into performance engineer, and then you get into actually a developer. And then the first thing as a developer that you do is when you touch a code base, especially production code base, is you have to write unit test cases for somebody else's code. And then after you actually write those unit test cases, then you are essentially now allowed to touch a piece of production code, but fix a bug as opposed to new piece of code that's being developed. And then you earn your right as you work through the levels to essentially then write new pieces of production code. And then eventually you're working your way up to, let's say, team lead or tech lead. And then you become a engineering manager of managing multiple engineers. And then if you decide to go down a technology path, you become an architect.
Right.
Now, and then distinguished engineer. So now imagine, and building on what Mukund said, imagine the future of 5 years from now, maybe, around that region, a lot of that onboarding, a lot of the ramp essentially is now enabled through AI and is accelerated through AI. So that level 5 engineer who's starting up essentially can automatically start to become, in the world of abundance, much more creative, start to think much more like an architect of solving systemic level challenges, as opposed to coding a piece of work, because you can outsource or delegate, exactly as Mukund said, for the AI to actually build this. So if anything, the future is that you are climbing up the rank that much faster to become much more creative, to solve much bigger problems, if you want to go down the architecture path. The other part that I can see over time is that you can actually go down into much more of a product thinker. And essentially much more strategic to say, why are we building this piece of code? For what problem are we trying to solve? And essentially start to apply the user empathy, user needs. And is this actually, to your point, do people actually want faster horses or do they actually want cars? And then start to actually break through in the world of kings, where you now have the luxury of time to think and solve problems that are not yet been solved. So I actually am very much in the camp as Mukund, that I think a lot of the fear is today unfounded or ill-defined. And I think those who embrace will be the ones who actually can become the champions of the future.
Yeah, I hear you, both of you. So I think one thing is very clear: the software engineering is up for disruption.
Absolutely.
I think so. So what will you advise for a college student who is opting for an engineering course today?
Yeah, I think engineering in general, I think teaches you problem solving, right? I think if you talk to any engineer, right, like whether they are chemical, mechanical, right, I think most people like in their colleges don't do programming, but they sort of learn problem solving and things like that. I think that's a pretty general and good skill to acquire, right? So I would like not sort of abandon degrees and stuff, right? And I think embrace AI. I think like the more sort of you work with sort of AI, Claude and ChatGPT and like copilots and stuff, right? Like you'll sort of realize that you can go much faster. It sort of enhances your thinking. And I think there are people who can actually operate AI really well, right? And then there are people like who are still sort of learning, right? And just like any skill, it's a skill to acquire, right? Like for example, like how do you prompt something, right? Like what prompts work, what doesn't work, right? I think and as people get better at it, right? Like I think there'll be people who will have significant advantage because they can sort of whisper to the AI and make it do things, right? Versus other people who are sort of struggling, right? So I think young people have this advantage. They can sort of learn things faster and I use this voice mode with my 4-year-old kid, right? To sort of talk to tell him stories and things like that. And it's pretty interesting to see, right? Like how it's patient, it's sort of listening to things. And I think younger generations are gonna embrace it much quicker, right? So just like what happened in social media and everything, right? Like they're much better than we are.
I guess beyond a point, we won't have option. I think it's with the initial phase where we're going through have and have nots, understanding people who understand.
Right.
So you're privileged to understand the technology deeply, right?
True.
So therefore you don't have a fear for it. But somebody who do not understand the technology, the fear is automatic first step, right? So I think the message for everybody is that use it, embrace it. That's how you know what the technology do. So I'm switching gears now. We spoke about opportunity. It's a massive opportunity. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And like ChatGPT also reconfirmed, it's almost in every single area, right? Whether you can take a SaaS unicorn and build one agent company on top of it, which is 300 billion plus. I listen Vice's, one of the podcasts came out which talk about, vertical agents, right? Talking about 300 billion, can come from that. We spoke about sales and marketing tech, trillion-dollar opportunity, software engineering also massive opportunity, healthcare and so on and so forth. So I think the key message is if you embrace this technology, understand what AI does, and especially now as we're moving into the agentic world from text to actions, right? As Mukund summarized, there's a massive opportunity where you can take one area, go very deep, understand, solve real use cases. I think large opportunity can be created. Then the automatic question now is, and Mukund, it's your second or third company that you're building right now. And Lakshmi, you have seen multiple companies getting built from Twitter. You were also acquiring companies in Twitter while you were at Twitter, right? So what it takes to build a company which is agent first company. Let me not call it AI first. Let me call it AI agent first companies. Is there anything changes? What are for a younger audience? I think let's look at few. If I break it down to 5 steps.
Right.
Like when you thought about Emergent this time.
Right.
What are the 5 steps you're doing to build a company?
Right. So I think there are a few sort of basic principles remain the same, right? I think like focus on the user, right? For example, we internally, as you said, like I think like it's you need to figure out where do agents work today, right? I think reliability is the biggest problem. So you need to keep narrowing the field till you find an area where you think agents are going to work.
So reliability. So within that area, so reliability, you have to really test for reliability.
Reliability is the biggest thing, right? So second step I would say is build a good evaluation, right? A good evaluation system. A good experiment framework, because a lot of these things you need to like experiment and tweak to figure out like what's working, what's not working. A lot of things are new, right? So we started with this SweBench eval, right, where we were world's #1 coding agent on SweBench, which is OpenAI's benchmark, right? And that sort of gave us a very good kickstart, right? Because I would generally say that anybody like who's building in agents should definitely start with some public eval, right? It sort of gets the team in the right motion to sort of think about problems, to sort of also align everybody towards one number that you can look at every day and see it's improving or not. And it's a pretty like genuine number in terms of feedback, right? Okay, like if your agents are improving, that number is going to go up, right? So I would say second step is first you narrow your focus, identify the area that you want to sort of work on. Then second is build a eval which is representative of the problem that you're solving, right?
So I want to summarize that. So first step was narrow use case or narrow enough use case where agents can be a little bit more reliable.
Reliable, yes.
Second is create a really strong or a continuous evolving, evaluation framework.
Yeah.
And SWBank, which is SWE Bench,
yes.
is one of the frameworks launched by OpenAI, right?
Yeah. So it was built by Princeton and Stanford and then adopted by OpenAI. And so that's for software engineering, but for every field, like for example, sales and customer support, you can find online evals which are public, and those are a good starting point, I would say. And then obviously you specialize into sort of a eval that is for your own domain. For example, we have internally multiple evals for different kind of problem statements, right? And then I think the focus should be on, like experimentation, right? How can you sort of really accelerate the rate of experimentation within the company? So we are sort of really focused on that. Like we have invested very significantly upfront on building a good evaluation platform, building a good experimentation platform, because we know.
So when you say experimentation, can you drill on what is?
So I mean, for example, let's say an agent is writing a program, right? Like, can you get real-time feedback, right? Saying that, did the test pass or not, right? If it is going to take, like you build something, then next day something's going to come, your feedback loops are going to be very slow, right? Can you compare the data quickly, right? Saying that, okay, why did this agent do better than this agent, right? So we have these automated AI, programs which will evaluate the trajectories of these two agents and say, okay, this agent did better than this agent, why, right? Like what changed? So I think you need to sort of invest in those debugging and those kind of thing. And third is, I think, get closer to customer as soon as possible. Obviously, you have a mental model of the problem that you're solving, right? But
so should I hire an AI researcher in my? So do you say that, would it be right to say that the founding teams should have somebody from an AI experience in the team?
That would definitely help. Right? If you have like an ML expert or somebody who has background in deep learning, that'll definitely help, right? But I would say just like find the smartest people you have, right? A lot of these things can be figured on the fly, right? And a lot of these things are so early, so new that like if you spend like 6 months on this, like you can become an expert pretty quickly, right? And I think a lot of things are good. There is a good abstraction right now. You don't need to go you don't need to go and train your foundational model to build to deliver value to a customer, right? So I think people can start at a different level and then go deep as required, right? So I wouldn't sort of wait for I need to find my ML guy before I start.
So after you've done this 4-5 steps and build a team, either you find an AI researcher or you learn after 6 months of experimentation, what really is the moat? If things are so easy, right? Everybody hearing to this podcast also now knows that software engineering is a massive opportunity, and we have millions of software engineers, right?
Right.
So what is, how do you think about
it? No, I don't think it's easy, right? I think like making agents reliable is really, really hard. Like, I mean, like we haven't seen anything in live right now. I think we are now seeing first sparks of things working, right? I think that also like started working when new Claude models and other things came out, right?
So what is the hardest problem in reliability? So what is the core, I would say the most fundamental problem that has to be solved in reliability?
I think there are a lot of different problems, right? I don't think there is like one core problem. If you were to point at one core problem, that probably is reasoning, right? Like where if you can make the models reason better, I think making agent work is making 50 different things come together, right? And in the right symphony to sort of really work. For example, like imagine an agent takes 1,000 steps, right? And if it is, or let's say 10 steps, right? If it is 99.9% accurate, even at every step, you get 90% accurate in the end, right? So because it's multiplicative, right? So I think it's really important that everything should come together, and it takes a lot of testing, experimentation to sort of get there. And I think the mode is like speed, how fast can you execute, how close you are to the customer, how fast can you learn. And I think, so for example, internally we have this rule that like whenever something new comes out within 24 hours, we have to experiment and get a new benchmark out of that.
That's a good hack,
So I think like when O1 came out, within 24 hours we knew what are the areas it's good at, what areas we need to spend more time learning, right? So I think speed is definitely I would say that right now things are evolving so fast that you need to index and also getting close to customer, right? So that you can understand the real problems, right? Because in a lot of cases the problem is may not care. Customer is okay to spend some time on this, right? Because the value is pretty high, right? Like they don't need the perfect system, right? They just need give me a jump start on this problem, right? So I think I would say those startup fundamentals still stays the same, right? And I think as you get closer to customer, high speed of experimentation, I think
they're basically more adaptable, basically to as things. Lakshmi, you obviously worked in world-class organization. So how a Twitter or a Google takes the same problem? Every time they launch a product world-class, right? Yeah. And Google obviously was a fountainhead of the AI research as well, right?
Yeah. Right.
So how fundamentally are things, when Gemini got built and launched, right, which you have the front row seat, obviously you know what really happened. So what is there a fundamental approach? What differentiates the Valley company or this world-class company from what we see in India? What can we learn from that?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I think Mukund said is spot on, is what we try to embody. I think there are a few things that are super important, which is just to elaborate on what Mukund said. we have within Gemini, one of the concerted efforts that Google did is to actually centralize all of the model building into the DeepMind team, and under Demis stewardship. So therefore, there's a single model. I mean, there's multiple models underneath, but there's a single team building the fundamental model capabilities that can actually the rest of the organization can benefit from. So what that means is essentially it's a service provider customer relationship. And so in the case of Mukund, he's relying on O1A model from ChatGPT. He's relying on cloud and he's relying on Gemini. And one thing that Mukund talked about is this evaluation framework. The value is not in the model, because if value is in the model and all you are is a wrapper on the model, then the model will eat your lunch.
Yeah.
And so the value is in all of the narrow use case and the reliability and the IP that's been built in to build the best possible agent that can solve that narrow use case better than anything else. That's also been externally validated by the SWE bench that Mukund talked about. So what matters is that evaluation constantly happens as new models come through to see that is there a new model capability that we can take advantage of at the application layer. So that's very similar to how we think about it. So Demis's team is in charge of thinking about what is the model capabilities that he is competing with the rest of the model players in the market. We are thinking about application to our so within search, I'm thinking about what aspect of the underlying model capability can I use in my application. And that is an important check and balance. Because if you can imagine everything is in the model capability, then you are necessarily not incentivized to move fast, because you can choose that in one thing I'm performing well. Why do I need to basically carry on anything else? So there is a important checks and balances. As we are the internal customers, we're holding you accountable to make sure that you are actually providing us the capability, because we both are competing at different levels of the stack. So that's how large enterprises think about in terms of building on what Mukund said.
If you have one takeaway for the Indian founders, what really differentiates a Valley company and a company who starts in India, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, people are hungry.
Yeah.
Capital is also available now. Let's say problem set is also known.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, and you have such a vast and deep experience in knowing such, really superb individuals who built very, very large companies.
Yeah.
What is that? What is the real difference on the ground?
It's talent and know-how. And so talent is essentially an ambitious talent who wants to learn and isn't exactly, is open to Mukund's point that the one thing that's certain is change. And so you need to have that growth mindset to actually realize that what you know today will become very different to what you need to learn tomorrow. So that adaptability of the talent to actually go figure out things from first principles, because ultimately as engineers, you're problem solvers. So problem is the thing that minds, tools will come, languages will come. Yes, when I started, when you said we were in the C++ Java era, today, probably that's not the language that most people are thinking about. It's agents that are figuring out what's the right language to use to solve the problem. So if you are trained in C++ and that's the only thing you can do, then essentially it's hammer looking for a nail. And so the world has moved on. So talent has to be ambitious and it has to be adaptable. The second thing is know-how, which is that to realize that this point on experimentation. The thing that I worked with Kayvon Bakepur, the chief product officer of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, CEO founder, Prabhakar Raghavan, the SVP of Google, Sundar Pichai, multiple times in meetings. The thing that common across all of those people is that the insatiable appetite to want to learn it all, that learning mindset, where the know-how comes in that the product will only be as good as the first time it goes into the market. In other words, the boxer who enters the ring. The best amount of planning does not prepare for the first punch. You need to react from that point. So what they all have is that realization that I have a gut call. I know what metric I need to do, but I need to experiment. I need to put this product in the market. And to Mukund's point, we obsess in what is the quick learning feedback loop. Hypothesis, test, and then learn. That feedback loop is incredible in the Valley. And especially in consumer products, is incredible. And with the consumerization of enterprise, the same mindset is going into this. So once you get that unbelievable feedback loop, then you will differentiate. The moat will become that you know more than anybody else in the market in terms of what works, what doesn't work.
Brilliantly said, Lakshmi. And I'm glad to say at least I'm a big believer of India, as you know, right? So I've seen founders' journey and my own journey over the last 2 decades is also, I am seeing more and more founders, like Mukund is a perfect example in front of
Yes.
you. He came from the US, did Dunzo, and now is doing Emergent, right? So people are learning fast. I think one thing which, if I have to go back in my entrepreneurial journey, how do you set a global benchmark? See, you are learning, you're doing things,
Yeah.
right? You're experimenting. I think all that some part of founders are getting. Some are really hungry and they're really out there and figuring it out. What often I see is that there's a gap in, I may still feel like I've achieved a lot, right? I learn,
Yeah.
I experiment, an agent works, let's say in some particular use case, I say, oh, wow, I have arrived, right? So how do I benchmark myself against the best? How do I become more aware, basically?
Yeah. I think this again goes back to the growth mindset and I'm Indian origin, and that's why I joined together to want to work across the US-India corridor. And so fundamentally, we can't aspire to be world-class without actually wanting to walk the talk, which means we have to get out of the essential comfort zone that we're in. The fact that Mukund, came back and is building something, Dunzo, he could have settled. As he said, he was retiring. He said, no, I want to go and build the next thing. And the benchmark he chose was not a local benchmark. It is the number one benchmark that is globally standard, globally accredited. And where do I stand? And not have the fear of failure, but actually let that be the motivation to say, okay, I'm going to put this out there, and I may be the number 15th on the SWE bench today, but I'll look at what is above me and what do I need to do to get there. And that fear needs to go away, that ability to experiment publicly. Jack used to say that, hey guys, every time you build a product, I want you to tweet it out to say we built this. We were absolutely like, holy no, Jack, let's not do that. But he would put it out there because he says that the moment you actually put it out there, it loses the fear.
Yeah.
You have to essentially be prepared to be vulnerable, to know that you don't know. And you're going to learn and you're going to try and iterate fast. And I think that is the important ingredient in essentially wanting to be world class. Lose the fear.
Okay, so I think so this is absolutely
just
fantastic.
to add to that, I think I think some of these initiatives like podcasts like this also helps, like where we are sort of getting this information out, right? I think there is definitely some information asymmetry, right? Like there are things when I was in SF last March I heard, and then I knew this, and I came back, and July I'm hearing it from people here. So I think there's some amount of information gap that definitely exists, and I think we need to bridge that gap.
Therefore, I'm drilling. So I'm glad that you said, and thanks for the compliment. At least, yes, through this podcast, we're trying to inspire next generation of founders who can therefore go to global heights, right? And not just think locally, which is what the natural tendency becomes. Because also a lot of environment is like that. And it's changing a lot very fast in India right now. So I'm going to drill down, right? So when we talk global benchmarks, I'm going to go a little bit more tactical in that so that founders can really understand. If I'm building a search engine, I know Google is a benchmark. I am building next social network, I know Facebook or Meta is a benchmark. But when I go to a specific use case, now, for example, take case of Emergent. Right, who's the Emergent trying to build a use case for software automation, and software automation within that also is a software maintenance, right? How do you really set the benchmark now here? So who should I, if I were a founder, or what is your advice to Mukund sitting here, for example, right? How would you set a benchmark?
I will attempt, and then please add to this, is that I think it comes down to, as a founder, you're very curious, and it's only the paranoid survives, as the great Jack Welch would say. So you are very curious to say, I'm going after this use case, and I understand, okay, first of all, you drill down and you drill down and you drill down to say, which use case, how can I build it reliably? Who's the customer who's willing to try this? So that is your natural curiosity to want to understand. Then the next thing is the paranoia to say, okay, I've found gold. Okay, I think this is where, if I dig here, choose your analogy, oil or gold, I found this thing, but now the paranoia kicks in, and it should kick in, which is to say, am I the best? Is this a local optima or is it a global optima? And so there you now have to get out of your comfort zone. The number of times I can only get asked at a guest that you've probably been to the Bay Area. As an example, in the world that we're talking about, Bay Area, San Francisco is still the cathedral of innovation when it comes to AI. And so you have to go out there and again be curious, walk the floors, talk. And you then very quickly understand that, okay, there is a SWE benchmark. You may have read about it, but that's what everybody else is comparing. That is the de facto. And now I need to basically compete against that for the global optima. So it's about that curiosity and the paranoia is a healthy tendency in entrepreneurs to have if you want to compete in the world. And then the last thing I would say to you is that after all of that, don't let that drive your product direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Your customer obsession has to drive your product direction, because otherwise you're building for your competition, not building for the
For
customer.
the problem, yeah, I understand.
No, I think the only thing I would add is that like we have worked with our customers to build benchmarks with them, right? So you like obviously global benchmarks are sort of one standard, right? But then you sort of work with your customer to see what is important to them and build realistic sort of evaluation set there, and that sort of helps you iterate on the problem much faster. So I think as you narrow down the problem, find the right customer, work with them to build sort of like evaluation set. I think everybody is pretty excited about AI right now, right? So I think like customers are generally like happy to sort of engage and sort of work with you, right?
Sorry, I was just going to add, then the question becomes, what if there is no global benchmark? What if you're so new that there isn't a global benchmark?
Like you're building next OpenAI.
Next OpenAI, what happens? And I think this is where, if you're a category creator, you got to basically play by your rules of the game and get the market to play your rules of the game.
Yeah.
So what happened is that so how did Google search come as an example? When there was there was like 50 search engines before Google search came, and ultimately the rules of the game that Google defined was that there's only two things that matter when it comes to search engines. It is usefulness and correctness. And if you define that as the benchmark, then it turned out that then the leader, Yahoo, was not actually optimizing on that as the metric. They were optimizing on time spent on a Yahoo page. So if you recall, there was so many links on a Yahoo page,
Right.
so many ads on it. So that is the benchmark that they were. So when you're a new creator or a late entrant and you want to be the category creator and you don't know what, then you have to educate both your customers and the market as to what good looks like. What is the rule that others have to play by? And that is your unfair advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we have an advantage here in India now because everything is new. So more we accelerate in our thought process
Yes.
on how to think. And that's what we are trying to do through the podcast. I think money is available, talent is available. I think moment of thinking goes to next level, which I think it is going. I think, and as Mukund said, a lot of excitement about AI.
I mean, I think a lot of things are possible. I think we have the right talent, we have the right amount of capital available now, right? I think people just need to think big, and sort of go after it. Yeah.
I think we are beginning to see ambition, especially in younger,
Yes.
number of college grads who are starting up, at Together Fund, we saw 3,000 plans. Out of that, 30% are age group between 22 to 28.
That's
and
amazing.
that young age is getting younger and younger, right? So, and also a lot of policy changes. BITS, for example, now has allowed you to incubate a company or start a company in the 4th year, right?
Nice.
So those small policy changes also making impact in India. So I think future is really, really bright. So with that, I want to summarize for the audience, coming back to movie Matrix, right? So Neo actually, what you talk about, Neo actually embraced AI in that case.
Yes.
Learn to actually utilize it
Yes.
to break the whole
That's
oracle
right.
or matrix, right?
That is right.
And not fear from it. So I think the choice is yours. Whether you want to embrace it, for the founders to embrace it or fear. I think if you embrace it, you can create a very, very large outcome for yourself and for the country and for the world, of course. So I hope you will listen to this podcast. Really, really wonderful talking to both of you. I think you really enjoy it.
Thank you so
really
much.
some great points.
Thank you so much, Manav. Such
Thanks,
a pleasure.
guys.